Good evening, everyone. I'm John Rowe, Mayor of the City of Portsmouth, and I welcome everybody to the Tuesday, October 27th work session of the Portsmouth City Council, which I am now calling to order. And this is a virtual electronic meeting in accordance with Governor Ralph Northam's declaration of a state of emergency due to the COVID-19 virus, the pandemic that continues to uh, impact both the city of Portsmouth, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and our nation. The governor signed his executive order on the 12th of March 2020, and our own local declaration of emergency, which we ratified, the Portsmouth City Council. Uh, we're holding this virtual meeting today, the 27th of October, without a quorum present in the city council chamber. And we're doing this in order to reduce the likelihood of spreading the COVID-19 virus. And we're doing this in uh, accordance with City Ordinance 2020-21 and 2020-102. Each city council member is participating from their home or some other remote location. Now I'm in the city council chamber. Um, this meeting is being live streamed on Facebook, and it will be rebroadcast in our normal process on how we rebroadcast meetings. With that, Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle,
Here.
Mr. Clark,
Here.
Mr. Glover,
Here.
Mrs. Lucas Burke,
Here.
Mr. Moody. You're muted, sir.
I'm here.
Miss Simmons,
Here.
Mayor Rowe.
Here. Thank you. We have 100% attendance at this meeting of the Portsmouth City Council, which again is a virtual meeting due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Uh, our first item on our agenda for the work session is a financial update, and I'll call upon Mr. Pace.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. Ms. Mimi Terry, City's CFO, will engage Council with a presentation relative to the financial update.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can
Yes,
everybody-
ma'am, we
Okay.
can hear you.
Yes, we
Thank
can hear you.
Well, to the Honorable Mayor, Honorable Vice Mayor, council members, administration, executive team, and others, I bid you good evening. I am before you this evening to provide the first quarter update ending September 30th, 2020. At council's request, I will also be providing an update on council city directives as well as fiscal year ended 2020 update. You can go to the next slide. Revenue versus budget. This is a 2-year comparison. The information before you represents the fiscal year to date ending September 30th, 2021. Well, 2020 for fiscal year 21. And the comparison of the same ending September 30th, fiscal year 20. Revenues are tracking as expected during the first quarter, and we're up by 2% from prior year. Increases are related to penalties and other charges collected, other local taxes, as well as state non-categorical. The city treasurer's strategic efforts in continuing to collect current and delinquent taxes has allowed the city to sustain during COVID-19 on taxes deferred but not forgiven is commendable to the overall revenue position. Next slide. Expenditures versus budget. This is a 2-year comparison. Expenditures are down in fiscal year 21 by 11% in comparison to fiscal year 2020, ending September 30th, 2020, but 7% down compared to current fiscal year budget. The reduction in expenditures relative to general government is due to the city not operating at capacity where we were prior to COVID-19. Please note, core services have continued throughout the city under the current circumstances surrounding COVID-19. Next slide. This slide is just a picturesque summary review of the categories for expenditures and revenues first quarter ending September 30th, 2020. Next slide. City Council has given instructions on directives for administration to address. The slide represents a summary of the status update of these directives. City Council directives update. We have completed disbursement of frontline hazard pay to all eligible employees. Thank you bonuses to all eligible full-time and part-time employees to show appreciation for their hard work and dedication has been dispersed on Friday, October 23rd, 2020 from the general fund. City Council has approved a 3% increase for all eligible employees effective November 1st, 2020. The increases will be relative or reflected in the Friday, November 13th, 2020 paycheck. That would be for the first full month. City Council determined in the previous meeting to give a one-time supplement in the amount of $1,500 to retirees in the Portsmouth Fire and Police, as well as the supplemental retirement plan, effective December 1st, 2020, to be distributed by John Hancock as approved by ordinance. Next slide.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
You may, and I think that's Councilman Glover. You have the floor, sir. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Ms. Terry. Can you go back to that slide about the one-time supplement?
Mm-hmm.
Are we paying that from John Hancock, the retirement plan, or are we paying that from the fund balance?
We're paying that from the fund balance. We're going to cash, that's going to be a cash payment. So we're going to take it from the fund balance and transfer that to John Hancock, so it won't be a long-term liability on our books for retirement.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Thank you.
No problem. CARES Act spending, where are we now?
Excuse me.
Is that Councilman Battle?
Yes,
Are you? Yes, sir. You have the floor.
Will John Hancock be charging us for the disbursement?
So John Hancock charges a fee for the disbursement, and that's pretty much not, it's their administration costs for mailing and any bank fees and charges, and for any administrative costs that they incur.
Well, why do they have to do it? I mean, we can't put it on the book, then take it off the book?
No, sir. John Hancock holds the dollars associated with the retirement fund. So those dollars are not on our books as far as being able to disperse. Those retirees are in their system. So we're talking a minimal amount. It's less than $1,500 overall to be able to, the mailing.
Is it more for us to do it? What I'm saying is, why do we have to transfer our funds from our fund balance to them?
Okay.
I mean, what burden does it put on us?
Everything. So basically, John Hancock is the actuary.
What do you mean by everything?
Everything. In the terms of the burden that it would cause, those employees are not on our payroll. So those employees are paid through John Hancock at the beginning of every month, their retirement dollars. And those dollars are dispersed through John Hancock. So they handle the overall disbursement of retirement funds. So we have that, we provide those dollars to John Hancock so that we don't have a long-term liability on our books for retirement. So we transfer that money. They actually submit it to the retirees, and they manage and maintain and are able to provide those dollars, direct deposit, or however, whatever means necessary to get that payment. Also, it's a very minimal fee. So they handle the calls, the letters, everything associated with ensuring that those supplements or that bonus is delivered to those retirees. It's 977 of them.
In other words, we do not have a financial relationship with our retirees. We would have to make up a list, get their banking institutions, find out whether or not we pay them directly or direct deposit. It would be a lot of work on us.
Saying now,
That
ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Are we clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I move on?
Please.
Thank you so much. Okay, so CARES Act spending, where are we now? The city has received $16 million in state funding for COVID-19, which has been used for costs associated with the pandemic. Funds must be expended by December 31st, 2020, and any unexpended funds must be returned to the state. To date, the city has incurred costs associated with the pandemic, and to ensure all funding is expended, all available funds not expended by November 15th will be designated to areas in need of combating the vulnerable areas of exposure due to COVID-19. Council will be updated in a report back of any unexpended, unobligated, and available CARES Act funds. Next slide. How did we do in fiscal year 20? So let's shift gears to the ending of fiscal year 20, which ended June 30th, 2020. Revenues ended at $245 million, if you round up, for actual, and expenditures ended at $236 million, rounded up. So we've basically collected 99.9% of our revenue versus budget, and we've spent 94.2% of our expenditures associated with budget in comparison. The numbers may change during the course of the audit. Again, these are unaudited numbers. I would stress that these are unaudited figures. Council has obligated reserves from the fund balance, primarily those made after June 30th for employee bonuses, retiree supplement, and the West Norfolk project. Next slide. Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. This is the CAFR update. The CAFR is due December 30th, 2020. It's normally due November 30th, but due to COVID and some other things at the state, they have extended the date to December 15th, 2020. The CAFR is basically an audited report card of our fiscal operations as a city during the course of a 12-month period known as a fiscal year. To date, several audits have been completed for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020, which include the Virginia Retirement System, the Sheriff's Audit, the Economic Development Authority Audit, as well as the audit of Portsmouth Port and Industrial Commission Authority. Those have been performed by Cherry Becker. The city is currently undergoing the annual audit as well as the single audit for the schedule of federal awards and internal controls, with an expected presentation date to council on December 8th to meet the December 15th deadline to the audit of public accounts, which is a state agency. Next slide. My favorite part, questions and answers. Anybody have questions?
Thank you, ma'am. Many questions. And I commend you for keeping the CAFR process on track. It's going to be great to have that by the end of the fiscal year. Good job.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, we're ready to move on to our next agenda item, and that is water and sewer rates. Mr. Pace.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, As you recall, Ms. Trimmer gave a presentation at the City Council's retreat in February on the state of public affairs while discussing both the physical condition of the infrastructure and the financial needs of the department. City Council approved a transitional rate increase of 9% for FY21 budget, and Public Utilities enlisted the assistance of a financial consultant. The planned capital improvement projects are driven by current and future regulatory requirements to include the Department of Environmental Quality, Regional Sanitary Sewer Consent Order, Department of Conservation and Recreations, Dam and Safety Regulations, and the Environmental Protection Agencies and Virginia Department of Health's Safe Drinking Water Act. Ms. Trimmer is on hand to answer any questions that you might have. However, I will turn it back over to the mayor at this point for additional discussion from council.
Well, it was also my understanding that earlier this year, we had a briefing by the consultant who was proposing that we sell the sewer portion of our utility system. It was my sense, and I may have misread my colleagues on council, that there wasn't any support for that. We were concerned that if we sold it to a third party, the third party would certainly have to set rates to meet the operating and maintenance expense, debt service, a profit. You don't get into private business without being concerned about a profit, and recover the sales cost. And council would lose the option or the ability to set rates and control how fast rates are increased or decreased. And so I think it would be appropriate tonight to make sure that we give clear direction to the city administration on this matter. And I propose that we memorialize by consensus that we stop this investigation of selling our sewer asset. With that, is anybody in disagreement with that position? Okay. Mr. City Manager, that you've got your direction. You don't need to bring that back. I see that Councilwoman Simmons has got her hand up. Ma'am.
Well, I did, but it was to say, I think it would be a terrible mistake to sell, because we don't know what a third party would need to make a profit, and we think our rates are high now. They go through the ceiling in order for them to stand it up. So, no.
Okay. All right. I think we're ready to move on to the next item, which is the continuation of the legislative update, which Sherry Neal was giving us at our last meeting, and we agreed to carry that over to the tonight's meeting. Mr. Pace, are you ready to continue that presentation?
We are ready. Sherry should be on and available.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Mayor Rowe, Vice Mayor Lucasberg, members of council. My pleasure to be here this evening to continue our conversation on the legislative package. And just as a brief update from the last time I spoke with you, the General Assembly special session has somewhat wound itself up. Legislation that they've been working on has been in conference, has all been done. It's been sent to the governor. The budget has been agreed upon by the House and the Senate. It's been sent to the governor. And the legislators have, instead of adjourning, they are in recess. And they're going to come back together again after the election. And the governor will then make his report as to whether he's going to accept or reject or amend any of the items that's sent to him.
Excuse me, Sherry.
Yes.
Councilman Battle, do you have a question?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Miss, who creates the legislative package?
In the
City Council does.
I'm sorry, Mayoral, Councilman Battle. The legislative package is a composite. And it's developed at this point in time through contact with our department heads in the city to see if they have any items for suggestion. We also, from my continuous dealing with the legislative process and National League of Cities, Virginia First Cities, Virginia Municipal League, and other boards and commissions that I interact with on behalf of the city, I can pick up information that gives me some ideas about some suggestions we may have. At this point in time, we bring it to the city council with suggestions. If you have suggestions at that point, you bring them to us, to me rather, and then we'll look into it to see whether we can take them forward or not. We used to allow the citizens to participate in it, but we stopped doing that a few years ago.
But is there a formal work session for us to go over who suggested what and what suggestions that we may have?
That's
Did I
what
miss
this,
that one?
no, sir. That's what this is leading up to that. The city's legislative package is ultimately put together and endorsed by city council. So it's very much the city council's package. And so this is the front end of the process.
Okay.
So if any member of council has something that they think ought to be included in our legislative request for the 2021 session, this meeting and the meetings that follow up until the time that we adopt the package is the place to make that comment.
Yes, because this is the second time we've gone through this, and I didn't see where we had enough input in the situation, or I didn't feel like we had enough input. But now I understand where we're going, and maybe we can get a little more input rather than, to allow the process to kind of be carried around us, and we approve it without fine-tooth combing it.
Is there a particular item of legislation that you would like to include in our legislative program for 2021?
Very well, maybe, now that I'm understanding the process a little better and feeling like we should have a little bit more input than we've had since I've been on council. Thank you.
Please continue, Ms. Neal.
Next slide, please. This is where we left off at 2 weeks ago at the last meeting. And I had put together some items for consideration for council as we move forward with developing our legislative packages for the state and federal sessions in light of COVID-19. And these,
Sherry, I think we all agree to these points that we would cancel the formal city council general assembly meeting and the electronic versus paper.
okay.
And we understand too that it's difficult at this time to determine the length of the next session. In fact, I heard today that it could actually go greater than 45 days.
Okay. All right, so then we're good with everything that's on the slide then.
Does anybody want to reverse that? Okay, go ahead.
All right, so the first legislative initiative, and actually the only legislative initiative I'm bringing forward at this time, would be this change in the code section referring to sexual exploitation of children. This matter was brought to my attention by one of our staff attorneys, Ms. Hoggart. I'm sorry, not Ms. Hoggart. Ms. Riddick, I'm sorry, Sheila Riddick. There's a misalignment in these two code sections where it's dealing with the reference to child sexual exploitation. And she ran into this problem evidently during a court hearing that she was having. So after I did the research and then I shared my findings with the Virginia Commission on Criminal Justice, they looked at it and they agreed with me that there was a misalignment. And then they also shared the information with the Virginia Department of Social Services. And they looked at it as well, and they too agreed that there was a misalignment. And it more than likely happened because when they changed these two sections of the code, it went through two different committees. And so that's why the connection wasn't made. So this was the initiative to have them fix that particular problem in the code. Any questions? Next slide. And other than that one legislative initiative, there are two budget initiatives for the state. And the first one would be to increase the Port of Virginia Economic and Infrastructure Development Grant Funding Program. As you may recall, this is something that we created and we advocated for in our 2019 legislative initiatives. And it was initially capitalized by $1 million. City of Portsmouth received $500,000 of that earlier this year for one of our programs, an economic development project that's related to the port. The second budget initiative request would be to ask for the increase in our emergency shelters upgrade assistance and grant fund. And again, as you may recall, this was also created through our legislative package. And it was, we had asked for $2.5 million annually. We were granted $2.5 million in the FY21 budget only, and was told that we could try to come back next year to get it funded again. So this request would be to provide the other $2.5 million annually and then carry it forward in ensuing budgets. Next slide. As far as our policy positions, when I put this presentation together, and originally I tried to keep it short and condensed. So I didn't pull out individual different policy positions, which we usually sometimes do, and just in short said that we would support the objectives of these various organizations that we belong to, which we do every year anyway. And a lot of the positions would include the funding, the real funding cost of education, the 599 funding for our police department, support for that, support for the stormwater, local assistance programs, so on and so forth. Next slide. As far as the federal initiatives, again, because of COVID-19 and the current state of the environment of our federal legislative and I don't know the word for it right now, but anyway, what's going on with the federal. At this time, there's so many unknowns as to which political party is going to have the majority representation in Congress as well in the White House. So rather than trying to come up with some legislative initiatives to carry forth to the federal government, I'm recommending that we follow the lead of the National League of Cities and their initiatives in their package, which deals with infrastructure improvement, funding for transportation, funding for transit, and those basic items. Next slide. So the next steps are here. Of course, election day is around the corner. Depending on what the city council decides they want to go forward with our legislative initiatives for the state package, then I will begin to solicit support from our General Assembly members. The last date for pre-filing legislative initiatives is the end of this month, next month, November. And an interesting thing to note is with the pre-filing this year started in July. It ends in November. And as of my last check, maybe 2 or 3 bills had only been pre-filed, which is very unusual, which also goes into what I was saying about the length of the session, whether it's going to be longer, whether it's going to be shorter. There's a lot of talk going on amongst the legislators as to how many bills each one will be allowed to put in. So there's a lot of balls, there's a lot of things up in the air. So we're working in very uncertain and unknown territory right now.
In other words, it's in a state of flux.
Thank
And let me interject this. If each member of council has a particular recommendation for a legislative item, please communicate that to our city manager by the end of this week so that he in turn can send it to us so that we can finalize our package at our next council meeting. Anybody have any problems with that? Okay.
No,
It
Mayor.
sounds like, okay.
All right, that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Councilwoman Simmons has asked for the floor. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Yes, sir. I don't know whether this falls under the legislative package, but I don't want us to forget our request to our federal delegation for a ship naming back to have a U.S. Navy ship named Portsmouth again. It's been going on for several years now. I know every congressman in Virginia signed off on it, and the federal budget seems to be pretty strong militarily. They're building. So I hope you don't forget to keep asking.
To address that, how about this as an alternative? How about I write our congressional delegation on behalf of council, as reminding of them this and asking for the naming of such a ship at the first possible date?
I'd love that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Vice Mayor Lisa Lucas Burke has asked for the floor. Excuse me, and then Paul Battle. Lisa, you have the
Mayor.
floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a question for Sherry. I know the things, they're not going to be the city council day or the municipal days, VML days, any of those, but just a question on how our lobbyists are going to be able to interact with our legislators for this package, for this purpose. I mean, is it going to be virtual or is that still being decided? Will you be here? Will you be there? And will there be any opportunity for our lobbyists or us to be able to interact with our legislators during this process, since it won't be any face-to-face meeting office times?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Vice Mayor, that was a very good question, and we're all wondering the same thing. My estimation at this time, and some people I've spoken with who may be a little bit closer to the decisions that are being made, we're leaning towards they're going to maybe operate the same way they did through special session, which means the Senate actually met in person only for the floor sessions, but all of the committee meetings were held virtually. And the House met totally virtually. All of the committee meetings were virtual and the floor meetings were virtual. So testifying to the bills was done like this, virtually or on the phone. As far as interacting with the legislators and their staff, I am leaning to believe that we're going to be doing that either virtually or by the phone, or when they come home on the weekends, if we can make an appointment to see them in their offices. I could be wrong, but I do not foresee business as usual in Richmond in January under the pandemic. So we're still kind of feeling our way through this right now. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, that gets us closer. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councilman Paul Battle, followed by Councilman Bill Moody. Paul, you have the floor. You're muted, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have one of the oldest, if not the oldest, shipyards in the country. Our city and that shipyard is one of the most instrumental things ever happened to our country in becoming a free democratic nation. And we've been kind of the backbone since the conception of our country. We have never, well, I don't know about never, but we don't receive taxes, to my knowledge, for their operations in our city. Though we appreciate and love them being here, is there any way we can put in a request for whatever way we can name it or call it, a $20 million stipend, a $20 million gift of gratitude for never paying us any taxes or giving us stipends for such? I know that they give other shipyards stipends, and with the success that we've had in supporting the country, and the way things go about $3, if they can pay $300 for a hammer and things like that, I'm sure that we can put in requests and get meaningful consideration about giving us some funds for on a recurring yearly basis in appreciation for the all of the support we've given to the development of this country. Thank you.
Mayor,
No, hold on, Sherry. We are members of the Hampton Roads Military Facilities and Federal Facilities Alliance. In fact, I am this year's chair. And your point is good. I recommend that we turn to the staff, retired Navy Admiral Quigley. We have a federal lobbyist, and put this question to them on how's the best way to approach this.
Yes.
Can we get a consensus? And I'll contact Admiral Quigley tomorrow. Okay. Councilman Moody, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, while the window is still open for potential items to be submitted to the General Assembly, I think we need to take a look at our charter item 3.11, non-interference in appointments and removals. I think we need to compare this with the state code and also with our sister cities. There was, and reason why I say this, there was a recent judicial ruling that brings that into question in some part. And I also think that we need to make sure that that's not inhibiting our First Amendment rights and also our rights as elected officials to express an opinion. All of us are asked for opinions all the time. And, citizens who elected us expect us to offer our individual opinions. So, before that window closes, I would like to see our legal department, legal staff to do some research on that and either come back with, hey, we're solid. We're in alignment with the state and with our sister cities, and at least to give us some confidence that that code section, that charter section is A-OK, or either recommend some changes.
Any disagreement with that as far as asking for the city attorney's staff to do research? Hearing none, we'll proceed.
No.
Councilman Clark has asked for the floor. Nate, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. My comment was in reference to, I believe it was page 12 on the presentation. It was a list of the organizations that we're either part of or with, and one of them, the main one that comes to mind is the BML. And I've had some issues in the past. I don't think we should just support 100% what these other organizations and their legislative packets, because the one thing that comes to mind is when we made national news for purchasing our firefighters a second set of turnout gear in an effort to prevent cancer. At the same time, the BML was fighting against expanding the cancer coverage for the firefighters who has gotten cancer by performing their job. So I think it's an issue, you know, because all of us were 100% on board with trying to prevent the cancer, but at the same time, organization was in Richmond that we're a part of that was doing just the opposite as far as state legislation. So I think we need to keep an eye on what these groups are doing, because they might not always align with us, even though we're part of them. So I think it's important that we, you know, have our say in exactly what's being supported and not.
Thank you, sir. How about if we do this? How about if we ask the city manager to send us the legislative packages that have been adopted thus far by these organizations? And I know the VML has adopted theirs, HRT has adopted theirs, the planning district has adopted theirs. So, Mr. Pace, if you could put that together in one complete package and send it to council.
May I say something?
There's no need, really.
Okay.
But certainly you may. The
No,
city manager is going to send those things out.
Yes, I understand. I just wanted to, if I may, say that we do a blanket. The reason why we do it that way is kind of blanketed, so that if something should come up where I have to be spoken to, we don't have to come back to council. And we've had problems in the past where that has been a problem when when a matter came up. We spoke to it in front of the committee up there in Richmond, and we were asked whether or not our council had already approved of this or not. So as a rule of thumb, the liaisons generally say blanketly we support this, but I do understand, and I tell this to our department heads all the time, just because you belong to an organization does not mean that everything that they stand for or they support is going to be something that we can stand for or support as well, because it affects us differently. And because when those things happen, we have to take a different approach or take a different stance. So definitely in agreement with you, Councilman Clark. I mean, we do it as a matter of practice, is what I'm trying to say. Exactly what you're saying. We do that.
Thank you, Ms. Neal.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any further discussion on this matter? Bill, you've got the floor.
I'd like to comment on Councilwoman Simmons's reminder on the Navy vessel being named after Portsmouth. We might, Mayor, before you send a letter, we might reference, because I brought it up with the concurrence of council probably 6 or maybe 8 years ago. And I think we had a commitment from our federal delegation and even the maybe the Armed Forces Committee. I'm not certain, but I think there's some correspondence that we probably have that gave us a commitment that indeed that would happen. With that said, I know we've had additional vessels built and launched during that time. But I'm just saying this as to do some research to help you in your follow-up for that.
Thank you. And the Navy uses names for a particular class of ships. States are one class, cities are another, individuals are yet another. And so your point is well taken. And we'll ask the city manager to do that research and do the first draft. Vice Mayor, you've asked for the floor.
Yes, I want to also add, probably gonna already add that in, city manager's gonna add the Virginia First Cities. We have our annual meeting on this coming Friday, and they are working on their agenda items as well. So want to make sure that those items are reviewed by our team as well.
Thank you. And that was in the list that Sherry had. All right. Any further discussion? Our next item is the status of the recruitment of our next city manager. As you know, we received an email from the recruiting firm. The deadline for the submittal of applications was last Friday. We got 74 applications, which is really, I think, quite good. 29 from Virginia, 4 from the Maryland, D.C. area. The next step is for the recruiter, the headhunter, to go through those applications to make sure that to weed out those that don't meet our qualifications and come up with a list of potential serious candidates. They're recommending that we have a meeting during the week of the 16th of November. The 16th is a Monday. I recommend that we have that meeting as early as possible in that week to give us time during the balance of the week if we need additional time. So to throw out a time and a date, I will propose that we meet at 6 p.m. on, we can actually make it 5 p.m. on the 16th, which is a Monday. Does anybody have a problem with meeting at 5 p.m.? Paul?
I have a question too.
You're muted. And this would be a meeting not only with the current city council, but we'll know by the 16th who's been elected to council. So it would be a meeting of not only the sitting council, but the newly elected, the council members elect, the mayor elect.
I have no problem with that, but I think that the new council should be the ones to choose the city manager and not the old council. I think we should give the new council a kind of fresh start in choosing what their pleasure is, rather than the existing council throw their shadow on it. That's how I feel about it.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor, you've asked for the floor. You've got the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. That was going to be my proposal, that we wait until the new council move forward with the replacement or the hiring of the new city manager. I know we all receive information and are all hearing kind of concerns, and our situation has changed. Our reasoning or our purpose or our mission to move forward with hiring a new city manager was when Dr. Patton was going to still be here, and we were wanting to hire someone before the end of the year so that they could work alongside with Dr. Patton. But now that that situation has changed, we also have an obligation to change how we proceed forward. The end of this year, we're a little less than, 60 days out. And also, it would give that new council an opportunity to get their feet wet, to see how their positions would move through. I think we have an interim in place who could get us through, the budget season, and we will be ready to go, some 60 days out, probably after the budget presentation sometime. So that was going to be my proposal, since the situation has changed. Things have changed since our last reasoning with wanting to hire someone before the end of the year.
Thank you. We do this by majority, and I appreciate your comments. We have advertised for the position. We have taken applicants. We do have an obligation to fill the position, but we also have an obligation to be square with our applicants. The concept of having the newly elected meets the concern of Paul, and actually I think it meets your concern. The decision is not being totally made by this council. It's in the interest of moving this along. I recommend that we meet with a consultant on the 16th and see where we stand. Does anybody have any other comments on this? Can we set a meeting date? Is there a consensus, a majority that meet at 5 o'clock on the 16th, Monday, and to invite the newly elected to
Yeah, I think
participate? And they have a full voice. They're not a muted voice. They have a full voice in this process.
I think that's exactly what we should do.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Madam Clerk, do we need a motion to set that meeting, or can we just do it by?
Let me say this, Mr. Mayor. I have no problem meeting, but in reference to choosing a city manager, I think that the council that's going to be elected on the 3rd should choose the new city manager. I don't see any advantage or disadvantage for the outgoing people by respecting the people's wishes on the 3rd and allowing the new council to pick the city manager.
I get that, but you might find out on the 16th you don't like any of that bunch. And so I think that's important for the new council to know, and they will know, what the recommendation is. And so I think that your concern is being addressed.
But I'm saying I have no problems with the new council.
Okay.
I'm saying the old council, whether they fit in if they're leaving, in choosing or happen to choose someone for the new council. I don't see that point.
What this does is move the process along with the new council participants.
We're comfortable with the existing person in charge at this point. And forgive me, Mayor, I cut across you. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Thank you. This continues the process. And I can tell you firsthand, having been a city manager, that it's important for the person that's not only applying for the job, but taking the job to know who they're working for. And it's a two-way street. That person wants to be able to say, yes, I'm going to be working for those 7 people come the 1st of January. So this just moves the process along. Councilwoman Simmons, you've got the floor.
Thank you, sir. I think Mayor Rowe and Councilman Moody may agree with me. I've been on a search for a city manager 3 or 4 times now, and I have never been in a situation where, quite frankly, a true winner didn't rise to the top. And I've never been with a group that had a discord over who was the obvious choice. Once you got through several sessions of interviews. And I think we're not going to pick a city manager, or no one's going to pick a city manager after 1 or 2 sessions. It's a very important role. There are going to be quite a few meetings. You're going to have to go through, what is it? They got 70 people. They might come back with 20, and then we whittle it down to 10 and whatever. I will bet you $100 I don't have that. Let's say the only 2 seats that change are John Rowe and Elizabeth Simmons. I bet you that the 9 of us sitting around the table, around the virtual table, will come to the same conclusion on a city manager. I just bet you. That's the way human nature works. I've never been on a panel that didn't come out that way. And the one thing that's going to be really important is that those candidates are going to have to look at the 7 people that they realize at that point they're going to be working for. And you can't postpone this event until after January. It might take that long because we may not like any of the people, but I don't think you can post for a job, have people apply, and then, oh no, we're not going to start this process until January. I think that's just been very poor form, and we should continue the process. with the input of the new people, whomever they may be. And I bet you we'll all agree. It's just the way these things usually work.
Paul, you're muted. If you want the floor, unmute yourself and you will have the floor. You're still muted, sir. Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not saying that we don't include the people who will be the folk coming into the council after November the 3rd. That's exactly what I'm saying. But if I'm going out, I would want them to work with the choice. Now, they might ask for assistance. That's different. But they might want to, those 7, deal with the situation themselves. And if I was going out, I would respect the incoming folk enough to say, okay, if you want us to assist you with it, we will. If you don't, then you guys handle it.
Well, I think your point is valid, and I don't think that there's going to be any disagreement with that, Paul. We're going to work in harmony to get there. I mean, there'll be a brand new council. You know, we still, even though I'm leaving council on December 31st, I love this city, and I want this city to have the best city manager possible. I want the council manager relationship to be golden, because that's the most important relationship. And that needs to start, that process needs to start as soon as it can. And that's what we're doing, is finding out who the applicants are and exposing them to the council and starting the process. You don't want to delay this.
Yes, but I don't want to hastily run into it with an old and a new council if that's not the preference of the new council.
I don't see that happen. As Elizabeth said, you know, there could be a situation where only 2 people leave council. But
I'm not saying, I'm not clairvoyant. I don't know who's going to be on council. All I'm saying is a matter of courtesy. I would, if I was leaving the council, I would stand back or down and allow, you know, the existing folk to kind of take this situation over.
And me personally, I will show all the deference to the new members of council, but we need to find out what composes this field of 74 and hear the recruiter's assessment of those folks. And so all we're doing is making sure that this stays on track. We're not making a decision on the 16th. Okay, did I see somebody else's hand go up? Bill, you've got the floor. Councilman Moody. Councilman Moody, you're muted.
It's not a good evening for the mute button. I've served under approximately 6 city managers, so I've been through that process probably 5 times. And Elizabeth nailed it. I've never been on the council who selected a city manager that there wasn't, at the end of the day, total agreement. There's never been a split or a 4-3 or a 5-2. We've always, the process is so inclusive that we've always ended up with total agreement on that candidate at that time. And the mayor has said that the new members will have a seat at the table in the discussion, and they can ask the same questions that we'll be asking. And, I'll be shocked as well if there isn't total agreement around that table at that time when either Miss Wright or Mr. Wright, city manager, comes to the total agreement of council. So
And that's RIGHT, not
Yes,
WRIG.
yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes, correct.
And again, this is not even interviewing the candidates. So think about our calendar between now and the end of the year. We got two major national holidays, a Thanksgiving and a December. We have to be mindful of the schedule of the applicants and their ability to interview. This is just the first step in finding out who makes up the applicant pool. Okay, well, I'll go back to my question to Deborah. We can call this meeting by letter, or do you want a motion now, Deborah?
It would help to have a motion now of the council or just a consensus. All I need is the consensus of the group to have the
Okay.
meeting.
All right. Without dissent, we'll set a meeting for 5 p.m. Monday, the 16th, to meet with the consultant. And this will be a virtual meeting. And we'll invite the newly elected, and they will have full voice. Okay. Mr. City Manager, do you have anything else for the work session? We don't. And we don't have a need for a closed session, do we, Mr. City Attorney? We don't. Well, we're at a point where we can adjourn the work session, break for meals, unless Deborah put Grubhub. No, I'm just being funny. We will start our regular session at 7, and with that, I declare the work session of October the 27th, 2020 at the Portsmouth City Council adjourned.